सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। सदाशिवसमारंभां शंकराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। रामो राजमणिः सदा विजयते रामं रमेशं भजे रामेणाभिहता निशाचरचमू रामाय तस्मै नमः। रामान्नास्ति परायणं परतरं रामस्य दासोऽस्म्यहम्। रामे चित्तलयः सदा भवतु मे भो राम मामुद्धर। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। हरि ओम। Whenever we take up any project, any goal, clarity about the means towards that goal and the goal itself is very helpful to have. Where I want to reach and what is the means that will take me there. If this clarity is not there, then either we'll be using some erroneous means or we won't have sufficient conviction in the means that we have chosen. For example, if somebody wants to become a doctor, what is the means for that person to become a doctor? It's a simple means is you go to a medical school. Now, if that person has ambiguity about whether this medical school will actually make me a doctor or not, or if there is something else that I need to do to reach my goal, that person's effort will not be wholehearted. Right? At every point, there will be a lot of doubts, or they can stray away also from the main path. Just like for worldly goals, we can understand the need for clarity in the goal and the means. In Adhyatma also, in spirituality also, if we say moksha is our goal, we should have a lot of clarity about what is the means towards that goal. And if I don't have that clarity, just like that effort of that aspiring doctor was not wholehearted, my effort on the spiritual path will also not be wholehearted. There is also a chance that one might get strayed away from the means because some other thing might seem more attractive, other thing might seem more appealing. This is the whole purpose why we have to do Praman Vichara. Praman Vichara is to understand how Shabda Pramana is the means and how it will reveal my nature as infinite Brahma. So this is what we were discussing. We took up the topic of Shabda Pramana and we saw that Apta Vakyam Shabdaha, that statement uttered by a reliable source, that is called as Shabda Pramana. And we went into the discussion of when we say Upanishad is Pramana, we say that it is not a composition of a human being. And for us to get clarity in that also, it takes a lot of time, a lot of reflection. The main thing we should take away from this topic of Apaurusheyatva, that Vedas are not composition of humans, is that there will be no change in opinion. there will be no change in opinion. This truth which has been declared by Upanishad, it will remain the same in all periods of time. If it was a human composition, then it would have these 4 limitations. This we saw elaborately in the last session. That some delusion might be there, that today we think it is something, tomorrow we think it is something else. Pramada might be there, inadvertence in considering all aspects. Any topic for that matter, when we think on our own, we say, oh, this thing I did not think only. So some pramada, inadvertence, can creep in there. And our mind is able to think only on those things which it has gathered data from outside. And we know our sense organs, how limited they are. So that limitation also will come. And the last one is called as vipralipsa, where human intellect has a tendency to become prejudiced or biased very easily. Any topic that it holds on to, it can look at it from its own lens, which is mostly formed by opinions of the past. See, through that lens only it will look at things. So imagine if you have to devote your life and say that I want to get moksha, and the means that we have is ridden with all these limitations. That's a very dangerous path. Nobody will say we want to take this up full time, commit our life to this, and then say that this is the supreme most knowledge that we want as our goal of life. And most importantly, nature of Brahma is such that it cannot be revealed through sense organs. So this Karana Apatava that you see, that itself shows this one, right? That Brahma will never become an object of knowledge. What are we going to think about? Because mind can think only about those ideas which have become an object of knowledge. So a lot of Mahatmas have written several articles, very, very detailed articles. There is one Mahatma ji, whose name is Karpatri ji Maharaj. He has written a text on Veda Pramanyam, just on this topic of why Vedas are apaurushaya, why they are pramana. But this was the summary, the gist and essence of what all things are mentioned there. So this we had seen in the last class, and then we saw that if we take Vedas to be paurushaya, a composition of human intellect, then it will not remain as pramanam anymore. Because aptavakya shabdah, it is not aptavakya. So if you remove shabda pramana, then literally you are left with no other pramana to know the nature of Brahma. Therefore, shabda pramana or Upanishad pramana, Vedas are apaurushaya. Now we have seen this topic about Vedas in our Kenopanishad first class, when we saw the summary of it, right? So few things I will recap now, but I will add some more things also. Okay? Because first time only if you see everything, then what are we going to study in the remaining things, right? So one by one we will study. And few new things will also come, what we have not discussed in Kenopanishad. And we'll recap few of it. All of us are very familiar that Vedas, to begin with, were just one body of knowledge. Vedas were not 4 to begin with. It was just one set of mantras which were there. Bhagwan Vedvyasji was the one who classified these Vedas into 4 parts. And one interesting thing is, although he classified it, the names that Vedvyasji gave are not his own. The names of the 4 Vedas come in Vedas only. Like this is a mantra from Purusha Suktam that all of us chant. Purusha Suktam is part of Vedas. There the 4 names of Vedas are given. Ruchassama nijagnire, Chandagam sijagnire, Tasmaat, Yajus tasmadajayata. So you see, Rucha, Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Chandasa means Atharva Veda. So all four names are there in Vedas only, but Bhagwan Vedvyasi classified them. And he had some, criteria based on which he classified. So Rigveda mantras are mostly hymns which are there, a lot of prayer towards forces of nature. Yajurveda mantras are more ritual predominant. Yajus means to do yajna. So in that way also you can take it, that lot of mantras are used in rituals. Lot of rituals which are there, they are part of Yajurveda. Meaning Rajasuya Yajna, Vajapeya Yajna, Somayaga, Putra Kameshti, all those rituals have some source and most of them come under Yajurveda. Samaveda is mostly those mantras which are metrical and can be sung. Last one is Atharvana Veda or Atharva Veda, where all other mantras are compiled. Here we say hymns related to creation, but it's very difficult to come up with a precise criteria. Okay, these are broad classification of Vedas. Why are we discussing all of this? Because somewhere our goal is to make sure that there is a lot of reverence in our heart for these Vedas. You'll be surprised to know many of us might not even have seen Vedas, right? Because it has become so rare to even see a physical copy of the entire Vedas which are there. So whenever we get a chance, wherever, more important than seeing Veda, what is more important is studying portion of the Veda, which is Upanishad or whichever Suktam that we are chanting, and keeping that tradition alive. Now this part we had seen in our Kenopanishad introductory session. We say that Vedaha Anadi, meaning Vedas are beginningless. There is no need to find a time that when did Rigveda come, when did Yajurveda come, when did Samaveda come. You say it might have gotten revealed at different point of time, but it was already there. Okay, this point we had seen in Kenopanishad. Now a little bit more on top of it, what we had seen there. Why do we say Vedas are Anadi, that Vedas are beginningless? One thing that comes out from this conclusion, Vedas are beginningless, is whatever is beginningless has to be Apaurusheya. Right? We cannot say something is beginningless and was created by a person. Is that person only? What is the, I mean, it's a contradictory statement. You say that person created and it is beginningless. So let us see a little bit about why do we say Vedas are Anadi. According to Vedanta, whenever we have to discuss or think about the question of whether it is Anadi or not, whether it is beginningless or not, there are certain fundamental things that we need to start looking at. Okay, so according to Vedanta, creation is beginningless. Right? There is no point in time when creation was not there and it came out as a new creation. It was already there, it became unmanifest. Just like when we wake up in the morning, we are not coming out from nothingness. Right? Although during deep sleep, nothing was there. Body was not known, mind was not there, thoughts were not there. But that doesn't mean everything got destroyed in deep sleep. So in the same way, creation becomes unmanifest and it becomes manifest back again. So why do we say this world or this creation is beginningless? You say first thing is ignorance is beginningless. Any ignorance for that matter, ignorance about any worldly object, any language for that matter. You say when did that ignorance begin? We say there is no point in time I can say. I am just ignorant right now. That is how it is. This is ignorance about our infinitude. Ignorance about my nature as Brahma. We say, point out a time when you started this ignorance. We say, no, there is no time in which ignorance began. It is anadi only. So if ignorance is anadi, then this jivatva, sense of individuality which is there, that is also anadi. What is the result of avidya? The result of ignorance is, I feel I am a finite being. I feel I am the doer, I am the enjoyer. So that notion is beginningless. Only thing which is there in our hand is how to end it, not to find out when it began. When was the first time I started thinking that I am a jiva? So you'll never find an answer. It is anadi. If jivatva is anadi, then karma pravaha, the chain reaction of karma, that is also anadi. Anadi means beginningless. I started thinking I am a jiva, and with that notion, I started doing karma to seek happiness. Right? These are fundamental parts. Don't apply it to a very small context and say, oh, I'm working right now, but is it for happiness or is it for something else? When we do vichara, we should appreciate the flow of thought. Sadhana portion is different, where we can discuss separately. So what is the root cause for us to do karma? See, root cause for us to do karma out of incompleteness is avidya only. What we call as avidya kama karma, right? That sequence. So from avidya came jivatva. From jivatva came this sequence or the chain of karma. And if anybody who has done karma, karma phala has to come. We cannot say that karma was done, but karma phala will go to somebody else. So that law of karma is maintained very, very systematically. That is why if karma pravaha is there, flow of karma is there, karma phala pravaha also will be there. Karma phala pravaha means what? I need a world to enjoy my karma phala. Enjoy meaning experience. Not always it is enjoyment. Just to experience my karma phala, I need a world. To experience this karma phala, I need a physical body. I need a mind. You see in Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha, how it was described. Body was called as Bhoga Sadhanam. And then subtle body was called as Bhogayatanam. Meaning one is the counter, for having interactions with the world outside. And another mind which is there, the subtle body which is there, that is the software with which I can experience this world. All of it is anadi. So when we say creation is anadi, creation is beginningless, we say, why is creation beginningless? Because avidya is beginningless. If avidya is there, jivatva is there. Jivatva is there, karma pravaha is there. Not karma. Karma is not anadi. Because any action will start in time and end in time. The flow of karma, doing one karma after the another, that has been going on for time immemorial. And those karmas are bringing karma phalas. Okay, are we all together until this point? What did we conclude now? That creation is beginningless. Vedas are manual that gives guidance about how we should live our life. If creation is beginningless, we say Vedas are also beginningless. Right? Because both of them will come together only. Creation and the manual. Bhagwan alone is appearing as this creation, right? So if creation is beginningless, Bhagwan cannot have a beginning. Bhagwan is also Anadi only. But over here, the main point we should notice, Vedas are going to give guidance about what is the purpose of life in this creation, how to come out of this creation meaning out of samsara. That guidance will emerge right at the time of creation. It is not something which has been written down later. So that is another way to look at Anaditva of Veda. When we say Vedaha Anadi, then all these points we should reflect upon. So if creation is Anadi, the manual of creation, the constitution of creation, that is also Anadi. And which is Anadi cannot be a new composition by a human being. When we say Paurushaya means that somebody is sitting in a room and then composing the Vedas. See, it is not that type. It has been there forever. Same mantra, Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha, is Anadi. Vedanta is part of Veda only. Upanishads are part of Veda. So whatever we are studying, whatever little we are studying, appreciating the depth of that thing. Another topic we had seen in our Kenopanishad introductory session was that Vedas are a breath of Bhagavan. It's a poetic way of describing, meaning just like life and breath, they go together in this physical body. You say as long as this breath is there, body is alive. So Veda and Bhagavan, they are always together. Okay, so Ishvara is a substratum or the Adhisthana of Vedas, and effortlessly these Vedas are residing in Bhagavan. Goswamiji gives that same translation in a sweeter form when Bhagavan is going to study in Gurukula. It will come in the next class in Ramayana. He says, Jake sahaja swasa shruti so hari padayah kautuka bhari. That Bhagavan, Rama, whose breath, sahaja swasa, effortlessly when he breathes, it is like the Vedas which are coming out from Bhagavan. All knowledge effortlessly resides in Ishvara. He is going to Gurukula to study from a teacher. So what can be a greater wonder than this? That is how he says. So a little bit more now on what we have already seen. This portion we had already seen. In all Puranas, we will find that the source of knowledge is Bhagavan Narayana. All knowledge, even if you take Bhagavatam, it is said first Upadesha of Bhagavatam was done by Lord Narayana to Brahmaji. If you see in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan tells Arjuna, Arjuna, what I am telling you is not a new thing. It has already been there before. I told it to Sun God passed it on to his disciple. But what happened is, in time, people became a little negligent towards this knowledge and it got lost in time. But remember, Arjuna, this is not something new that I am telling you. Whatever Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga I am going to teach in Bhagavad Gita, it has already been told before. There is a parampara that is there. Even in Vedas, it is said the first teaching of Vedas is given to Brahmaji. Okay, you see Brahmaji, whenever you see a picture, 4 Vedas are there, right? 4 faces of Brahmaji, we say, are representing 4 Vedas. So the point is, one who becomes Brahmaji in every cycle of creation is a jiva which has done so much of upasana that they become the fit recipient to receive this knowledge from Bhagavan Narayana. Okay, so the first student of Bhagavan Narayana is Brahmaji. In Mundaka Upanishad also, same Shruti mantras come, that this knowledge was first received by Brahmaji and then he gave it to his disciple Atharvana, so on. This lineage continues. So now this knowledge, which was in unmanifest form, has come in total intellect. Brahmaji represents Hiranyagarbha, the total mind that is having this knowledge now. Now there are few rishis who are of very, very pure mind, who did lot of tapasya, lot of sadhana, ashtanga yoga, whatever practices you call, austerities they did, and they tuned with this total mind. To those rishis, the same mantras got revealed. Now that could have happened at different point in time. Like Vishwamitra Rishi came much later, but to him Gayatri mantra was revealed. So like this, different rishis came at different point of time, and then the same knowledge which was available in Hiranyagarbha, in Brahmaji's mind, that got revealed to all these rishis. Our job is, whatever got revealed to them, study it well and become free. Because there is a Purva Paksha some people raise. They say, oh, these rishis got knowledge in meditation. Right? Mantras were revealed in meditation. Then why do you say that we cannot get knowledge in meditation? Right? We say we are we, they are rishis. Okay. Our part is just to get that knowledge and just transcend this mind. Purify the mind through sadhana and transcend this mind through knowledge. But if you ever wonder about how does this parampara come? Where does this knowledge come from? So this is the parampara. From Bhagwan Narayana to Samashti mind, total mind. And from that mind, whoever tapped into it, they were recipients of this knowledge. Now, few more aspects of Vedas, in addition to what we have seen before. Now I'm recapping and also adding few new things. One of the nature of Vedas is Niyata Shabda Rashi. Niyata means very well regulated, that which is fixed. Shabda means words, Rashi means group of words. So total number of mantras which are there in Vedas, total number of words which come in Vedas, that is fixed. So we cannot say, we can add or we want to add a new Veda. There are some views like this. They say that how are these Vedas compiled? They say everybody started composing separately. The rishis started composing separately. And then finally, they just compiled everybody's understanding into one book. And then if somebody else comes with a new Veda, it will just get added to it. You see, no, it is not in that way. That you cannot keep adding chapters. Whatever number of mantras to be revealed, they are already fixed. Because that is called as Niyata Shabda Rashi. Second is called as Niyata Anupurvi. In the sequence of words which come in Vedas, that is also the same. So if you chant one mantra, right? Ganana am tva ganapatigum havamahe kavim kavinam upamashravastamam. So gananam tva, you cannot change the sequence of that word. Right? You cannot say tva ganana am. So like how you did Anvaya of verses. You see, we cannot do Anvaya while chanting of Upanishad mantras or Vedas only, because the sequence in which they are revealed, that is fixed. So Niyata Anupurvi, that is another nature of Veda. Third one is called as Niyata Swara Vyavastha. Means whatever Udatta, Anudatta, Swarita, that tone that goes up, down and normal, that Vyavastha, that arrangement is also fixed. That is why when we study Vedic chanting, if it's a strict teacher, they'll be very, very particular about each swara. And generally students don't like it. Huh? They'll feel, oh, I am saying it udatta. Why are you not hearing it? You say, no, you are not saying udatta. You're saying something else. So that is the purity, we should aim to have in chanting. Now, if somebody doesn't have samskaras of chanting, it will be difficult. So that is not to discourage anybody from chanting. But if we know the right way to chant, then the effect is more. Okay, niyata swara vyavastha. Now the classification within Vedas, we have seen in Kenopanishad first session. What is the classification? It is divided into three main categories. One is called as Samhita or mantra portion of Veda, where it is mostly different types of hymns. Like Purusha Suktam will be there, Rudram Chamakam will be there, Gayatri Mantra. All of this is part of mantra portion, also called as Samhita. Second portion is called as Brahmana portion, where how to use the same mantra for ritual, that is described. Right? Like Purusha Suktam, you can do a yajna using Purusha Suktam mantra. So how to do that, all details are described. And Aranyaka describes a lot of meditation practices. And most of them are very, very subtle meditation practices. Like in Kenopanishad only we will see a few upasanas, not many of them. But in Upanishads like Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, so Aranyaka, you see that word, Aranyaka comes there. So a lot of upasanas will come, which are mainly for making our mind, to break the shell of this mind, from thinking about ourselves just like a finite being, expanding it to bigger dimensions. So this is the broad classification of Vedas. And Upanishads can come anywhere in these three portions. They are not end part of Upanishad. End part of Veda, like physical end. In Samhita portion also you will find Upanishad or mantra portion. In Brahmana portion also you will find Upanishad. And in Aranyaka portion also you will find Upanishad. Now this portion we have seen, but I just wanted to reflect upon one topic. That entire vision of Vedas, if you want to categorize, it can be categorized in only two words. Okay, one is called as pravrutti, another is called as nivrutti. Pravrutti means we all have certain duties, certain roles that we have taken in life. So while we are doing that, what is the mindset that we should have such that that work ends up purifying our mind? Okay, so that is the main purpose, main result of pravrutti. It is not to get us caught up in more and more samsara. This is what Raman Maharshi said, Kruti Mahodadau Patana Karanam. If we don't have the perspective of Vedas in life, we will miss the point. Somewhere we will go and feel like I'm getting caught up in that web more and more. So Vedas say purpose of pravrutti is not in karma. Purpose of pravrutti is what has that karma done to me? Right? Meaning our Bhagwan Shankaracharya ji said in Sadhana Panchakam, Vedo nityam adhiyatam apachitihi kamye matistyajyatam. Apachitihi means make sure that this karma that we are doing becomes a flower of worship at the feet of Bhagavan. And whatever mind gets pulled in kamya karma, there it should get reduced. So if these two things are there, then naturally this mind will seek something higher. Seeking something higher is called as nivritti. Okay, nivritti does not mean that I am doing some work and I will stop doing it. So that anybody can do what is, so great about that. In fact, that nivritti which is done out of doership, you say that nivritti is not nivritti, it is pravritti only. Okay, because there is a doership involved in saying that I will not do this thing. So nivritti, if you want to just put a different way, it is called as maturity. Whatever things we were doing as pravritti, whatever roles that we had taken up in our life, now mind says, I have to seek something higher. Vedanta is telling me that jivatva alone is the cause of bondage. This sadhaka now puts forth effort to remove jivatva. That is called as nivritti, where the main focus becomes on abiding in our own true nature as Atma. Wherever we miss this point, Bhagwan Shankaracharya ji does khandanam. If somebody says, pravritti alone will take us to the goal, then he says, no, they are not two parallel paths, they are sequential paths. Bhagwan is not criticizing pravritti. What he is telling is, we should plan our life very well and not get caught up in a particular stage, making sure that we blossom into the next stage. Gurudev used to give example of a flower. He said, if that flower remains a bud forever, it has not explored its fullest potential. And neither can you hasten that bud to blossom. Meaning what? Pravritti is needed to go into nivritti. We cannot suddenly say that I will work on jivatva, I will try to abide in my nature. It will not be possible. Mind will not allow us to do that. But through Vedas, right? So all this portion which is there, mantra, brahmana, aranyaka, give us lot of sadhanas. And within that sadhana, karma yoga is a sadhana. It is not sadhya. Sadhya is Bhagavan, sadhya is Atma. So that will be through nivritti only. If you remember, this discussion was done in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagwan Shankaracharya ji said, I am taking up writing commentary on Bhagavad Gita because several other commentaries I studied, but this clarity was not given there. That was his introduction. And that is why he said, this is the purpose of me taking up writing Bhagavad Gita Bhashya. So this we have to keep reflecting back. What is the meaning of pravritti? Is living our life in a very dharmic way, but making sure that mind is seeking something higher. And that pravritti will take us to nivritti. And you will realize nivritti only does not mean studying Upanishad. Okay. Studying Upanishad with Varanam. Varanam means choice, firm choice that I really want to abide in my own true nature. That sadhaka is a nivritti pradhana sadhaka. Now, with that goal, that sadhaka might still be working in the world outside, might still have family to take care of. Every other responsibility will remain as it is, but his goal has become very different. Okay, so that is one way to look at this. This is again just a summary that we had seen before. There are different Upanishads, Kena, Ishavasya, which come in mantra part, Chandogya comes in Brahmana part, Brihadaranyaka is in Aranyaka portion. So Upanishad is not literal end, it is the essence of the teaching of Vedas. And then this part also we had seen that mantra, brahmana, aranyaka along with an Upanishad is called a shakha. This was again the mastermind of Bhagwan Vedvyasji, where he said, if at least people study their own shakha, and he connected it with their family lineage. Just like as we are proud about our family lineage, he said, let them be proud about their Vedic lineage also, and make sure that at least they are familiar with it. So whoever is a Vedic, thinker or lives a Vedic life, you say they follow this shakha and they have studied some portion of that mantra, brahmana, aranyaka of that shakha, and one Upanishad they have studied from that shakha. Two shakhas, Dvivedi, three shakhas, Trivedi, four shakhas, Chaturvedi. Like that, last names also are there for these different shakhas. And then we had seen about how many shakhas are remaining in each, Veda right now. Number is very small, but that doesn't mean knowledge has been compromised. Gurudev used to say, even if the first mantra of Ishavasya remains, he says entire Veda can be brought back. There is an interview, Australian interview with Swami Chinmayananji. On YouTube it is there. His way of answering also was so different. He said, if Ishavasya Midagam Sarvam is there and one can abide by it, he said everything else can be brought back. So this is just to appreciate different aspects of Vedas, shakhas. And this was our Swami Gangeshananji, who took up this project as his main sadhana. Main sadhana means his compassion on humanity. For them, it is not sadhana also. Printing the Vedas, compiling them, and he would choose where it should be sent. You cannot purchase it. He will decide who should be the adhikari, fit recipient to receive these Vedas. So Gurudev had a lot of love towards Gangeshananji. Gangeshwarananji, that was his name. Okay, this portion we have seen before until this portion. And now this is something new that we are going to see now. Where does Vakya become Pramanam? What is the area of operation of Vedas that we should reflect upon? Oh, we are already at 7:15 or 8:15 rather, 7:15. I don't think we can go into this topic right now. Yeah, let us pause here because it's an elaborate topic and I think we should give sufficient time for it. We'll see this in the next session. And next session will conclude Praman Vichara. If you have any questions, do turn it into the Google form. That way I can organize the time and within 45 minutes, we can conclude the topic and also take if there are more questions. Okay. All right. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Okay. Will you write an article on Praman Vichara, condensing the salient points of this lecture series? Many subtle points require repeated reading and meditation on them. That is very true. The second part, not the first part. I'm not writing any article. But we will repeat or recap the whole thing in the next session. Right from Pratyaksha Pramana all the way until Shabda Pramana. The key points we will recap. The slides are made available. We can always go back. And if you feel there is some portion that we want to cover again, if you think I should elaborate it again, so please put it in there. I saw one note about Anvaya Vyatireka to cover that portion again. So I will touch base upon it next time. And once we complete Praman Vichara, it will be a long time before we go back to it. Because these topics don't come in our regular text. Whatever we studied, like Atma Bodha we studied, there Praman Vichara was not there. But it is very subtly embedded into that text. So that is what we should appreciate. Since intellect is a product of avidya, then how can it be used to fully understand this knowledge, even if it is made sattvic? It is product of avidya, but avidya is made up of 3 gunas. Right? One is sattva guna, rajo guna, and tamo guna. The power of sattva guna is it will help us understand nature of a thing as it is. Not only Vedanta, anything which is there. Even if I am sitting in a meeting and listening to others speak, if tamoguna is high, no matter what they say, mind is turned off inside. Means I'm not able to comprehend whatever is said as it is. In Vedanta also, at least while doing Shravanam, while Pramana Vyapara is happening, if Sattva Guna is high, knowledge will take place as it is. Nowhere in Vedanta it is said, only with this percentage of Chitta Shuddhi, knowledge will take place. There is no hard and fast limit like that in terms of how much of Chitta Shuddhi I should have so that knowledge will take place. Increase Sattva to an extent where I can clearly understand I am not this intellect. Or I understand how Pramana works. What is Vedanta trying to say? You see, that is the whole purpose of intellect. Intellect can never become 100% sattvic or remain in sattva guna all the time. Now, that is not to discourage us from sadhana. We should understand all these statements in the right perspective. It is to remove this notion that liberation will come at certain time. Or liberation will come when I do something else. Vedanta says no, purify the mind as much as we can and then do Vedanta Shravana. But we know that is not the end of our journey. Why? Because we are not living in a very isolated place where we don't have any other roles and responsibilities. We have our work, we have our family, so many things to take care of. So it is said that portion will be made easier with more and more sadhana. One part is understanding this Vedanta knowledge, but another part is how to translate this knowledge into our vyavahara. So you see in Sthita Prajna Lakshana, Bhagavan is describing from that perspective. That anudvigna manaha, anabhisneha, he can withdraw from vyavahara like the turtle. So that part also is nature of mind only. Atma doesn't have sneha, Atma doesn't have udvega, Atma doesn't even need to withdraw. Right? So what is it that I need to do? All those guidance is given for mind. Okay. So both aspects are important. Not to wait for a time where I feel that Antakarana will be made very, very sattvic. And then I will do Vedanta Shravana. This part we will see in Chandogya Upanishad. Because the student of Chandogya Upanishad is very different. He is not like our Nachiketa. He is not like our Naradji. He is an arrogant student. So how come this teaching was given to somebody who is arrogant? right? Generally, we say that this teaching has to be given to somebody who is qualified and everything. Why did that Upanishad Rishi choose to give this teaching to somebody like Shvetaketu? So there are a lot of Mahatmas give different perspective. They say it is to remove this notion that liberation will come only at certain time. Knowledge will be given. It is up to the student to increase their sadhana chatushtaya and benefit from this knowledge. Okay. All right. More clarification on vritti vyapti and phala vyapti in the context of brahmakara vritti. Okay, so this also I have noted down. We'll discuss this point also. Okay, any other question? You can turn it in right now. If not, you can turn it into the Google form. We have a few more minutes. Some of you shared with me that it takes time for you to type it. That is why make sure that we stay throughout the session. In the world also, we come across certain knowledge like mathematical formulae, a plus b the whole square, a square plus b square plus 2a, which feels so nice to read this after such a long time, or laws of thermodynamics or Laplace equations, which can be thought of as existing even before creation, as they were discovered later by human intellect. So would you call them apaurusheya? In a way, yes. I mean, simple example that is taken in addition to all these things is whatever law for that matter, right? Law of gravity, that law was not created by an individual. It was existing before. All that this individual did was, unlike others, this individual sought to discover that particular law. Just like our rishis, right? Everybody was interested in so many other things. They said, no, we are interested in knowing the nature of the substratum of this creation. So like that, all different laws might be there, which are existing even before and were just discovered by an individual. But only thing is, we should note that when we say existing before creation, these laws, the worldly laws, they are part of creation. I mean, it is not something which was there before and then creation came after it. Just like when creation became unmanifest, all the laws also became unmanifest. And when it comes back again, it will come back in that particular form. So in that way, we can understand it. All laws are not, human creations. They were there before. Another thing to note here is it should be uncontradicted, right? Because there might be some things which are there. I'm not very knowledgeable to point out in particular, but you can evaluate by yourself that there might be certain things which we say is a law at some point, but later on it got contradicted. Somebody else came and found a different law. We say it should not be of that nature. As long as it fits that category, then you can say it is apaurusheya. It is not composed by a human being. All right. Hari Om, everyone. My thought is that in the next session, we will do our concluding of Praman Vichara. Then we'll be left with 3 more sessions before we start our Thanksgiving retreat. So this week, next session, we will have concluding session. The week after this week, 2 sessions morning, we'll do guided meditation. I don't want to start a new text in 2 classes. So guided meditation will start at 6:30, go until 7 o'clock. And then the week of Thanksgiving, we will take a break so that we all can get ready for the 8 or 7 sessions that we'll have during the retreat. The registration is open, so looking forward to seeing all of you there. A lot of ideas that we studied in Praman Vichara will complement the teaching from Chandogya. Okay. Hari Om. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.